The Canadian Broadcasting Corporation hates your guts. I know that's a bold claim to make, but in today's examples, we'll see them lie to their audience, hide information that the reader needs to know, and basically insult anyone who disagrees with their narrative, even in news stories rather than editorials. This video is the third in the fake news propaganda series. You can watch them in any order. And again, I focus on media doing backflips to attack critics of Klaus Schwab and the World Economic Forum. Our first headline labels people as conspiracy theorists. The hatred starts right from the first photo caption. One protester holds a sign referring to the Great Reset conspiracy theory. A bold-faced lie. The sign refers to the Great Reset book in which Klaus Schwab supports every COVID lockdown measure and claims COVID gave us the gifts of more time, greater stillness, more solitude. The CBC uses the tactic we saw in part 1 of this series, where Mark Hay pretends Schwab didn't write the book, so we can label critics as conspiracy theorists. And that label is a hateful smear aimed to offend. It doesn't just mean you disagree. It means your opinion has no value because you're crazy and delusional. It's a way of censoring people and cutting off civil debate. Now, the people in the photo are protesting lockdowns in Quebec, among the strictest in the world, with curfews and huge fines for not wearing masks outdoors. But the CBC doesn't say lockdowns. No, it's measures by the government to stop the spread of COVID. Wow, what bias. Now let's go back to the headline. The article is about emails complaining about an idea to bring in a UBI, Universal Basic Income. The article has nothing to do with lockdowns, the Great Reset, or the Montreal demonstration. It's just a gratuitous smear. The CBC exploits the people in the photo, reinventing them as poster boys and girls of conspiracy theorists. If you protested lockdowns because your business was closed or you lost your job, you're a conspiracy theorist to the CBC. Concerned that lockdowns gave your kids depression and anxiety issues? Conspiracy theorist. Complain that lockdowns canceled your cancer screening or your knee replacement operation? Conspiracy theorist. Everyone in the crowd has a story, but CBC isn't interested. To them, people are nameless, voiceless plebs. Dehumanized. They hate us. The photo also uses the same sleazy techniques as the BBC. Remember in part 2, the BBC used this woman as the poster girl for the Great Reset conspiracy theory, though the real story shows that she was protesting something else, like curfews or bans on outside gatherings. Can you find any Great Reset signs in these other photos of the Montreal demo? CBC stereotyped the entire crowd based on just one guy's sign. What shameful prejudice. The article says tens of thousands of people have contacted senators to oppose a bill about universal basic income, many of them based on outlandish conspiracy theories. Many, but not most. So CBC's criticism is about a minority of those emails. It doesn't say how many. To me, 100 could be many, but out of tens of thousands of emails, that might not even be newsworthy. And what's the CBC's definition of a conspiracy theory? The photo caption is labeling people as conspiracy theorists for asking for freedom. The sad joke of this article is that nobody wrote to the senators to show any support. It's a bad idea, even if any opponents were over the top. John Tasker tries to discredit opponents for even caring, since the bill only creates a framework to study the idea, and the government has been cool to the idea. Not true. UBI was already on the agenda at the Liberal National Convention. Hey, look, it's the same journalist. Tasker says opposition to the basic income bill is a well-organized campaign. Organized by whom? The only so-called conspiracy theorist named in the article is Peter Terrace. But he didn't organize anything. He just sent one tweet. He didn't even email a senator. Now let's click this hyperlink. Hey, it's the same photo. They walk down the street with handmade signs, and the CBC calls them digital mercenaries. Your taxes fund the CBC, which then accuses you of disinformation for saying freedom is good. Yeah, what could be worse than being slandered and belittled, not once but twice, by your national broadcaster? Oh, there's a third post. And who knows if there are even more. This one claims the Great Reset stemmed from an idea proposed by WEF, Which idea? It's a 280-page book with controversial ideas on a variety of topics, including a claim that pangolins were partly responsible for COVID, and a prediction that inflation and interest rates would be low for a long time after the pandemic. So CBC examines the potential consequences of mainstream Canadian politicians amplifying suspicions about the organization, which is their way of saying criticizing WEF is bad. A pretty one-sided view by people that have never read the book. This next section only sounds crazy, but the vast majority is true. I'll just deal with a couple. The transhumanism cyborg thing comes from Schwab's Fourth Industrial Revolution, along with articles on the WEF website and speeches on the WEF stage, proposing brain implants, cybernetic prostheses, human genetic engineering, synthetic biology, and I've already covered depopulation in my video on stakeholder capitalism, with, among other things, a clip of Jane Goodall proposing we lower the world population from 8 billion to 500 million. Here, the CBC wants to spread the hatred, so they blame the letters on the trucker convoy. Well, Trudeau froze bank accounts of people who protested him, so people aren't more paranoid, they're just waking up more. Then CBC smears the social conservatives. Oh, they must be conspiracy theorists. They linked Finance Minister Chrystia Freeland with the WEF, and lie that WEF wants to introduce a universal basic income. What the fake news CBC hides from its audience is that Freeland isn't just linked with the WEF, she's on their board of trustees. And WEF has been promoting universal basic income for years. I searched for universal basic income on their website and got 1,200 hits. It's the CBC spreading the misinformation, while LifeSite answers the 5 W's, saying who would qualify, what they would get, annual cost, and another W, what could possibly go wrong? Got people giving up work, population dependent on government, higher taxes, and so on. In the end, that $85 billion is paid by the people writing to those senators, either through taxes, lower benefits, or inflation if the government just prints more money. The last 2 pages are a total crock. The Great Reset lives on, as if this is the conclusion. But this is the first reset reference since the first photo. This professor says, the WEF is at the center of so many COVID-related conspiracies because in 2020, unnamed leaders talked about a great reset to evaluate how the economy is structured. Fuck! If you'd read the book, you would know that WEF is at the center of COVID-related criticism because WEF founder Klaus Schwab wrote the book COVID-19, The Great Reset, where he says horrific things like the COVID-19 crisis cannot go to waste, and simple pleasures like smelling a melon or squeezing a fruit will be frowned upon and may even become a thing of the past. Doesn't look like he knows a book exists, or that his own prime minister said,
"This pandemic has provided an opportunity for a reset."
He hasn't read any of the letters sent to the senators, yet he insults the writers. Oh, that's ignorance and prejudice at work. Oh, then he notes a decline in people's trust in government, the press, academics, and experts. Whoa! My trust in these people declined just by reading this article. And now some fun facts. When they updated the article, they replaced the photo of this senator with a photo of a lockdown march in the Netherlands that has nothing to do with this article about letters to Canadian senators debating UBI. Of course, CBC wants you to think the photo is proof that crazy people are linking Klaus Schwab to COVID. But the banner is only quoting the cover of his book, which they want you to believe was never written. When they switched the photo, they didn't bother to correct the typo. It still says, some its leaders. And worse, CBC should have deleted the blunder about the Liberals being cool to the idea of UBI after the party voted 77% in favor. Fun facts. We saw how both the BBC and CBC used a single reset sign to smear a whole crowd. Then, when they wanted to target social conservatives, both smeared LifeSiteNews.com with no supporting evidence. And also strange that both stories had nearly the same subheadings near the end. It looks like the same playbook. Like the BBC story, CBC uses straw man fallacy. Misrepresent your opponent's arguments, then knock them down rather than fight a real opponent. That's why they never showed the letters or tweets from the alleged conspiracy theorists. They never interviewed them because that would allow them a chance to defend themselves. Our second CBC story also uses techniques used in the BBC story, burying the lead and covering your ass. We go backwards in time to when Justin Trudeau said
This pandemic has provided an opportunity for a reset.
So naturally the opposition was outraged. The leader of the opposition at the time posted this. It's hard to believe anyone will look at the carnage caused by COVID-19 and see an opportunity. This is not the time for a massive and risky experiment to reimagine the economy. You might expect the next headline to read something like, Trudeau blasted for using pandemic as opportunity. But the CBC carries water for Trudeau and the WEF, so this was the coverage. The Great Reset reads like a globalist plot with some plot holes. What? Well, let's flip through pages 1, 2, 3. Okay, here he is on 4, 5, 6, 7, and a bit. So Aaron O'Toole's side of the story ending up on page 4 is what I call burying the lead. Now, most people only read the headline in the first couple paragraphs of these articles. Or they would read about Pierre Poilievre brushing up with conspiracy theorists and miss Aaron O'Toole's attack on Trudeau and his opportunity for a reset. Still, by including O'Toole's argument at all, the author can claim balance, repping both sides of the story. So he's covering his ass. Now, it would be a filthy lie to call Poilievre a conspiracy theorist. So to cover his ass, the reporter only says that Poilievre brushes up with conspiracy theorists.
What does that mean?
By just mentioning Poilievre and conspiracy in the same sentence, CBC hopes the reader will connect guilt by association. The article is mostly about O'Toole, but it leads with Poilievre. And without the Poilievre section, the article would start with O'Toole's criticism of Trudeau, and more people would read that message. So voila, burying the lead. So CBC tries linking Poilievre to some conspiracy theories in circulation, without saying what they are, and globalist plots without any explanation. Now let's blow the lid off CBC's lie. The claim is that Poilievre linked Trudeau's comments to a call for a great reset made in June by Klaus Schwab, a straw man saying tinfoil hat people are overreacting to just one line from a speech, when Poilievre is really referring to Schwab's book, which pushes globalism. Schwab wants power controlled by global governments like the UN. In the book he says, put bluntly, we live in a world in which nobody is really in charge, because each nation decided its own COVID response, rather than everyone following a central regulator. He called for more funding for the WHO, so they could exert more power. Yeah, imagine Bill Gates setting the rules for healthcare in Canada, and you never have a right to vote them out. The globalist agenda is playing out in Europe, as EU bureaucrats in Brussels are deciding how much fertilizer farmers in Poland can use, how many cows you could own in France or Ireland, and even forcing Dutch farmers off their land. Schwab praises the European Commission for this, calling it the most tangible manifestation yet of public authorities deciding not to let the COVID-19 crisis go to waste. Aaron Wary mentioned Stephen Harper was a guest speaker at Davos. But unlike Trudeau, Harper wasn't glowingly praised by Schwab on stage for being a young global leader of the World Economic Forum, along with half his cabinet, including the Deputy Prime Minister on their board of trustees. Wary is a senior writer. He must know these things. And the word shadowy pops up a lot in these articles. By definition, conspiracies are secret. So when the fake news media falsely accuses people, they pretend these stories have shadowy or spooky characters. But the fact is, there is no secrecy in these complaints against the Great Reset. For example, the X account of Anti-WEF, with 185,000 followers, displays famous WEF supporters, names, shows pictures, shows clips of WEF's speeches, links to WEF's website. Everything is documented from sources in plain sight. And yes, Mr. Wary, we should have a reality-based debate about these issues. But it's the CBC that's blocking the debate by duping its readers with this spooky conspiracy nonsense. Then out of nowhere, Wary questions Poilievre's behavior. For what? Giving the Great Reset a bad book review? And nothing about Trudeau's behavior. Then click this blue hypertext about behavior to get to this unhinged article with 13 screens of abuse. I won't go beyond this page because it isn't a CBC story. CBC hates Poilievre so much that it linked to a competitor's website to dogpile him. Writer Rachel Gilmore prides herself on being a nuisance and was fired in 2023 after posting horrible personal attacks on Poilievre's wife. CBC wanted a bigger attack dog, so they linked to Rachel. They want you to read this article so much that clicking conspiracy theorists also gets you to the same article. Whereas if you want to know what they mean by brushed up, you're out of luck. Clicking there leads to the BBC's phony fact check we saw in part 2 of our series. I need a laugh, so we'll move on. In other videos I've shown where Klaus says
that we penetrate the cabinet,
and that Trudeau and half his cabinet are World Economic Forum young global leaders. And then Colin Carey asks,
in the interest of transparency, could the member please name which cabinet ministers are on board with the WEF's agenda?
So here's CBC's response. World Economic Forum official says Canada has bigger issues to discuss than conspiracy theories. What a hilarious lack of self-awareness. Canada has bigger issues to discuss than conspiracy theories? So Canada's national broadcaster writes yet another article discussing conspiracy theories and hyperlinking to even more discussions about conspiracy theories. Then they link to their competitors' conspiracy theory stories. Politicians should ask whether they're spreading misinformation from bad actors. Wow, Colin Carey quoted Klaus Schwab accurately, and this article smears him for disinformation. Here's another one denying the existence of the book. Great Reset, lowercase, it's just an opinion piece. I put all happy buzzwords in a short piece and leave controversial stuff for the book in Schwab's name. Nice trick here. After Conservative MP Colin Carey told the House of Commons WEF had penetrated more than half of Canada's cabinet, he was accused of spreading disinformation by NDP's Charlie Angus. True, in the full clip we saw Angus accuse Carey, but CBC knows that accusation was false. By that point, Schwab's video had been circulating 5 years. They could have asked Adrian Monk how many cabinet ministers were on board with WEF. Oh, that would have been real journalism. And we've seen Charlie Angus before. He was part of the story where the people demonstrating in person are labeled digital mercenaries. They don't believe media. Well, no wonder, Charlie. You're part of the problem. CBC's hatred resumes. Adrian Monk accuses WEF critics of anti-Semitism. Oh, we've seen this before in part 1. Old farts like Goebbels accused Jews of seeking power. So now anyone warning of excessive government powers must hate Jews. It's about as logical as saying Tom Selleck must be a Nazi because he and Hitler both had brown mustaches. CBC throws feces at the Freedom Convoy. Concerns about the Great Reset, the World Economic Forum, and the apparent plan to turn Canada into a communist state is one of the underlying conspiracy theories that motivated some of the protesters who participated in the truckers' protest. Some? Did any protester actually say this? Or are you just assuming they thought that way based on your own prejudice? I went to the convoy 3 times, each time seeing thousands of people. I also saw 20 hours of live streams. I didn't see any signs protesting the Great Reset or WEF. The only people talking about communism were immigrants from communist countries, protesting mandates that looked like the things that were done in those repressive regimes that they escaped. And that was before Trudeau froze truckers' bank accounts. Personally, lockdowns closed social clubs, my sports, yoga classes, the gym. I gained weight due to a lack of exercise, boredom, and the need for comfort foods. My blood pressure went up, as did my risk for heart disease and diabetes. I didn't see most of my friends for 2 years. They were too afraid to meet. I wasn't allowed to visit my brother because he was in another province. I went through the worst depression of my life, but countless people had it much worse than me. And the CBC and a useful idiot politician tell us we supported the Freedom Convoy because of conspiracy theories. Duck you. Happily, the CBC ran out of venom at the end, so I'll read some of it with some calming scenery. In a statement to CBC News, Poilievre said the annual WEF meeting in Davos is a hypocritical gathering of billionaires, multinationals, and powerful politicians who lecture working class people to stop buying gasoline. There's no apparent benefit to Canadians. Taxpayers should not need to pay to send government leaders to such a meeting. Rather, ministers should put their full attention to serving everyday people in Canadian communities. Click the playlist or related video box for another in this series, or check my channel page for more choices.